good evening. Welcome to this evening's newscast on Kaieteur Radio. Kevin Smith here. Before we get to the news in detail, let's get to today's front page comment of the Kaieteur News. Behavior unbecoming in the National Assembly. Guyanese parliamentarians provided proof of the vulgarity and personal abuse which continues to masquerade as representative parliamentary democracy. The budget debate kicked off last Monday with parliamentarians hurling the most scurrilous attacks at each other. Instead of focusing on what matters most to citizens, some members of parliament assailed the assembly with bitter and personal abuse. Instead of discussing how Guyanese will or will not benefit from the country's oil and gold, some members were more concerned with brandishing their record of fertility and pelting homophobic aspersions. While all of it took the form of heckling, it went beyond the pale. This exhibition of crudeness and did not make for pleasant listening or viewing. Some of the comments were dirty, sickening, and insensitive. It was a display unbefitting of the National Assembly and has exposed a sorry bunch of pretenders devoid of courtesies and respect expected in our National Assembly. It was an unforgettable and unforgivable, indecent and smutty performance. We feel tainted just writing and reading about it. And on that note, we head over to the news in detail. Following heightened calls from its shareholders that more action is needed in the fight against climate change, ExxonMobil announced that it would be reducing its emissions by 2025. Now, in this regard, it said that shareholders can expect to see a reduction of its upstream greenhouse gas emissions by 15 to 20% when compared to 2016 levels. Meanwhile, investment group Engine Number One said that scrutiny of the company's claims reveals that its efforts fall short of what is needed to position it for long-term value creation in a rapidly changing world, and also highlights the significant long-term risks associated with the company's current business model. In fact, the investment firm noted that claims of consistency with the Paris Agreement fall far short of targeting net zero emissions by 2050. Meanwhile, a class action lawsuit was filed against ExxonMobil on January 28 in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas, alleging that ExxonMobil violated federal securities laws by misleading investors as to the valuation of certain company assets in the Permian Basin. The Permian Basin is a petroleum province in the southwestern U.S. The lawsuit, Yoshikawa versus ExxonMobil Corp. et al., was announced by Block & Leviton LLP, a firm that represents investors and helps to maintain the integrity of U.S. financial markets. The plaintiff, Mendy Yoshikawa, acquired Exxon securities at artificially inflated prices, the suit says, and was damaged upon the revelation of the alleged corrective disclosures. And now let's tell you, a 98-year-old pensioner who lives alone was found by her caretakers raped and left with a battered and bruised face yesterday morning at her home on the Quarantine in Berbice, while 4 men have been arrested in relation to the attack. Pamela Bruce, who takes care of the elderly woman, said that she was alerted by a neighbor who also takes care of the pensioner that something was wrong. She disclosed that when she ventured over to the house, she saw the elderly woman with a swollen black and blue battered face. Regional Commander Jairam Ramlakan confirmed that 4 persons have been arrested. The men are in their early 20s. One of the four held so far, one was arrested in Crabwood Creek and the other arrested in Rose Hall Town. They are being questioned as investigations progress. And moving on, ExxonMobil Guyana's Government and Public Affairs Advisor Janelle Prasad said that the Eliza Destiny oil vessel was able to produce oil above nameplate capacity of 120,000 barrels per day because its total liquids capacity is 158,000 barrels per day, and produced water is currently coming up at a slow rate. Chief Operations Officer at Hess Corporation Gregory Hill said that ExxonMobil intends to evaluate and pursue options to increase nameplate capacity at Eliza Destiny. This would include some piping changes and debottlenecking, and is expected to occur during a third quarter shutdown period, Hill had explained. ExxonMobil maintains that the recently reported production numbers above 120,000 barrels per day are due to optimization of the vessel's current design. And moving on, Opposition Member of Parliament Ganesh Mahipal has joined several other persons to challenge the government on its decision to amend the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. In court documents, which were drafted by attorney Roysdale Ford, Mahipal contends that the move is unconstitutional in that the government is seeking to exercise a certain level of control over the constitutional agencies, which are supposed to free from any control of the executive. And Nala's Vice President Dr. Bharat Jagdeo revealed that a portion of the $383.1 billion budget for 2021 will be financed through loans. With aims of managing the debt and spending, the Vice President explained that the PPPC government is looking to establish a cap and is currently looking at examining recurring expenditure. The story comes on the heels of the senior minister, Dr. Ashni Singh, revealing that no new taxes funded the $383.1 billion budget. However, Dr. Singh failed to state how much of the budget was actually financed by loans. In other news, Guyana puts on a united front when it comes to fighting for the country's patrimony in the Venezuela border controversy, with political leaders casting aside differences and banding together to ensure that every square mile of the country remains intact. That same unity should be applied when it comes to condemning ExxonMobil's continued flaring, so said former EPA head Dr. Vincent Adams. Dr. Adams said that flaring issues have only since been recorded at the Liza Destiny oil vessel, Exxon's first project. With the oil giant eyeing more ships for the Stabroek Block, Dr. Adams firmly believes that it needs to ensure that it nips flaring in the bud at the Liza Phase 1 project before anything else. And that brings us to the end of this evening's newscast. I am Kevin Smith. Thank you for listening. Coming up next is the Glenn Lal Show. Tell it as it is at exactly 19 hours 20 or 7 p.m. Do stay tuned.
Want value for your advertising dollar? Then place your ads on Kaieteur Radio's Newscasts. Streamed live on 6 different mediums, reaching hundreds of thousands. Advertise today.